good care of my horse.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, look, I mean, those are good reasons to continue riding horses, but nevertheless, here's some reasons why I think that we shouldn't do it anymore. And then you can continue the dialectic that way.
So I don't understand. Is this a meme, or is BRYN, are you actually now not vegan?
What's the distinction between a meme and a non-meme?
I mean, my assumption is that you're joking.
I don't know if I'm joking.
Say what?
I don't know if I'm joking. So far, no one's been able to defeat my argument against veganism.
What's your argument against veganism?
That it's pointless.
Why is it pointless?
Because of the open access problem.
What's the open access problem?
That there's no legal framework against consuming animals currently. And so, in virtue of that, even if we individually reduce our consumption, that isn't going to lead to a reduction in animal harm.
Why would that not lead to a reduction in animal harm?
Right, because the entire point of the open access problem is that if there is a resource that's openly available, then just because one person stops exploiting that resource doesn't mean that there will be a reduction in exploitation. It usually will just end up being exploited by someone else.
What do you mean?
Because the cost of exploitation.
Available?
By openly available, we just mean that it's something that the market could invest in.
Okay, so you're saying that if something can be invested in, then it doesn't matter how many people consume it, it just will be there?
Yeah, it'll just be produced or consumed or exploited or whatever. Yeah.
Is this like some view that rejects supply and demand?
It doesn't reject it, but it's heavily critical of it.
So you think that if demand dropped to zero, we wouldn't see a change in meat production?
No, I think that would be a special case.
You think if it dropped by 50%, we wouldn't see a change?
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty strong position, and why do you think that?
Because if demand dropped by 50%, then the cost would just change, not necessarily the supply.
The cost would change how?
It would just go up or down depending on whatever would continue to make it profitable.
You think that if 50% of the meat disappeared, they would find a way to make the same amount of money off?
It might not be the same, but it would be approximately the same, yeah.
Approximately the same. But you're talking about meat prices going to some like insane level. If 50% less people were buying meat, all of that money that those 50% would have spent, yeah, I agree with it, so it has to be a meme. All of the money that those 50 people would have spent would need to be made up for in the rest of the product.
Yeah, so they just double the price.
Okay, but that seems implausible. Like how and you think that this drops off?
I don't think it does. I think there's a special. I think there's a special case exclusively at zero. So it's
wait. So you think when it's at 99%, there's like one steak that costs like billions of dollars or whatever the meat,
and one guy buys it.
Yeah. That's the argument. Yeah.
It's raised only in airplanes.
Oh wow, that's really crazy. Well, I mean, it just seems like the problem with that argument is that it's more plausible that no one would pay for meat at that point than that we'd have an ever decreasing amount of people paying exorbitant amounts for meat.
How would supply and demand even work if it actually happened that way? Right? The supply would never decrease as demand decreased because the price would go up.
Well, that's part of the argument is that I think that supply and demand curves oversimplify the issue. So,
what are you even saying here? This isn't. Come on, BRYN, you're not being.
Well, I'm saying that supply and demand are factors to price, but that it's oversimplifying the issue. Is we also have to take into account marginal utility.
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, I mean that how much someone desires something is still going to relate to the price. So even if nominal or gross supply and gross demand are accounted for, just in virtue of the fact that some people are going to want to consume meat is going to mean that meat will still be produced.
I'm not sure if I follow. I thought you said if no one wants it, no one's going to buy it, or they're not going to produce.
Yeah, so if there's 0 people, that's a special case. But in all other cases, there's going to be meat production.
But you think that if 99% of people stop being meat or buying meat, that the whole industry will be sustained by like one guy paying like $1 billion for like a steak, or
Yeah,
many
just
billions of dollars?
yeah, just look at things like edible arrangements, or like scented candles. You know, basically no one wants those things. Yet they're like multi-billion-dollar industries.
No one wants them. Where do you get the idea that no one wants them?
Very few people want them.
Yeah, where do you get that from?
Who wants an edible arrangement? It's a contradiction
Okay,
of terms.
this is okay.
Like what? Why would you want something that you can both like want to look at and want to eat? It's just like a contradiction in terms.
Yeah, it frazzles your intentional state, so like mixes the wires up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it would mean to intend to do something.
Is this actually the argument that you were running on people in here?
Yeah.
Did anybody have a reply to it at all?
Well, they got into the sort of conceptual argument you're giving me. The problem is they obviously didn't go to the margins, and so they weren't evaluating the position. They were just trying to appeal to the empirics, which don't yet exist, as you and I have explored before. Like, it's the case that even though vegan consumption has gone up, meat production hasn't gone down. But that's explainable by other factors that they just apparently were unaware of or unable to bring up. So the problem was they were appealing to the like current empirical situation. That's not going to work out for them. And then for some reason they just refused to redact the other position.
Yeah, so it's like there's a trend. You give an account for that trend that makes veganism sound useless.
Right, exactly.
And instead of people looking at the implications of like that trend being like extrapolated out over time and thinking about like whether that's actually like plausible, you know, or maybe looking if there's an alternative account, they're just granting you that the current situation is accounted for by your description and it must continue. And yeah, that's that seems kind of crazy. That's it. It still reminds me of that one position that you mentioned that one day where the capitalist is just, there's like this capitalist conspiracy about the. Can you remember? Can you remind me of that one?
You just like the conspiracy to like
derive demand.
Yeah, to force meat on us, like derived demand is a non-concept. It's just like the entire market is driven by like the secret like cabal of capitalists who decide what everyone consumes, and like marketing is perfectly efficient, and no one really has any desires, or the market just doesn't exist.
It's just a hilarious view, and also, I mean, I assume that there are other forces than supply and demand that cause
it's just
because
like ask yourself has logic.
It seems like supply and demand is probably like
you asked
a
the
very
right
large
question.
part of it.
Yeah, because you just look at things like
it's true. You just ask the right questions and you make it seem like it's so stupid.
Which is that although diamonds and water are both scarce resources, and they're both desirable resources,
he's still going.
They nevertheless have very different price elasticity and very different.
It made it seem really ridiculous, but
costs of production and very different like market values. And so,
wait, sorry, I'm not following. With diamonds and water?
Yeah. So both of these things are scarce resources. We don't really see water as a scarce resource in the first
definitely
world,
not as scarce as diamonds.
Diamonds aren't scarce either. They have artificial scarcity.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is there's things like artificial scarcity that can change the prices of things. So this is where we start getting into the alternative explanations for prices. So this is where we can start to grant a little bit of the meme argument where marketing really can set prices sometimes.
Yeah, because
diamonds aren't rare at all. They're incredibly abundant, and in fact, we can manufacture them. Right? It's not.
Yeah, they're just bolted up.
Yeah, because the reason that I assume supply and demand doesn't completely account for why prices are what they are isn't because I've done any deep thinking about alternative things that could account for prices. Like, I'm just thinking about the price is like, set. I guess the main thing I'm thinking is just that it's not clear to me why I would make the assumption that that's the only factor. And then I can also do like a little analysis when I think about like, I mean, maybe there's some company that does this all completely like robotically, and a machine like literally spits out a price just based on how many sales they've gotten. But I just think that there's like, if humans are setting prices for things, like there's just other factors affecting our psychology than just
right. There's other things too that like most modern economists take into account, like things like time preference, like the fact that I can get something sooner rather than later, and factor into prices and stuff like that.
Does marketing is that actually something that is separate from supply and demand? Because marketing just seems like it would cause demand to go up. That doesn't seem like it would be some.
Well, what's interesting in the diamond and the water paradox is that the empirical research shows that although demand for diamonds hasn't changed, nevertheless, and the supply hasn't changed. In fact, the supply has gone up. The price has also gone up. So in some cases, you can simply have effective marketing causing artificial price inflation, even though supply and demand haven't changed in the way that we would expect given the price going up. It seems like in the diamond case, what should have happened over time is the prices should have gone down.
Yeah, so I guess, I haven't thought enough about econ. I don't even know if I'm thinking correctly. It seems like, if you have some situation where supply and demand are constant, but the price changes, that implies that something else can affect the price.
Yeah, and even the important part about this paradox is in some cases, the opposite of the prediction occurs. So, in the diamond case, demand has stayed constant, supply has gone up, but nevertheless, diamonds are more expensive than ever. And a large part of that is because of, it can to some degree be explained by artificial scarcity, but in many ways, behavioral economics, which is sort of a really new field, has shown us that like artificial demand, or the idea that you should own a diamond, or the fact that there's a notion that diamonds should be expensive, can cause the marginal utility of a product to be seen as different than what it was previously. So it's not that more people want diamonds, it's just that more people want expensive diamonds. So they just charge more.
Well, my only curiosity was whether a BRYN had actually become a non-vegan. You never know with you, because sometimes you have some friggin' weird positions about things. But yeah, that's a funny argument. Okay, I'm going.